The objective is weaker, divided Syria. The United States does not care about the Middle East. The Syrian people, they said they're not going to accept a dictator, they're not going to accept a tyrant. If you want to control this Syrian society, you have to put a person that is acceptable by the supermajority. Jolani cannot be a threat to Israel. If the Israelis don't like him, they'll kill him.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to i3 Pulse. Is Israel using the chaos in Aswada to quietly kick off phase one of Greater Israel? Has Jolani's vision for a unified Syria collapsed, exposing him as a failed leader? And will Turkey get involved and put Israel in their place? So, Sheikh, Jazakumullah khairan. We saw what happened in Syria. Israel struck the Syrian Defense Ministry in Damascus twice on Wednesday, killing one person, injuring 18. And then Israel military has been saying this is a message regarding the events in Aswada. Now, like hundreds of people have been killed, Sheikh, and they're saying that the government is trying to kill the Druze, and then the Druze, others are saying they're trying to kill the Syrian Bedouins. What is going on?
Well, so lots of going on, definitely. Things happen basically with the militias of Hikmat al-Hajri. Hikmat al-Hajri is one of the Druze leaders who is allied with Israel, overtly. He doesn't hide it. He has a big militia. They're very well, equipped, and they have enough weapons basically to cause damage. So there was a scrimmage between them and the Syrian security forces, kind of the Syrian police for al-Shara, basically. And also after these skirmishes, basically the Syrian army, was sent to Aswada. Anyway, so what happens is that the Israelis kind of bombed them alongside with these militias, and they killed 700 of them. At least these are numbers basically that were coming out of Syria. 700. So
700 of the Syrian
security
army.
forces, yeah,
Okay.
security forces and the army people. So the whole country, was going upside down. Things went sideways, really. Now, what happens is that the Shara pulled both the security forces and the army out of Sweda. Sweda is that one province which has a majority or good portion of Druze in that area, and the Bedouins across the whole country. To be honest, before the Bedouins got in free, the whole country was furious. And then while the security forces were leaving and so forth, the Hajri militias again went and slaughtered the Bedouins in the Sweda. And now, in Syria, there's lots of Bedouin tribes, across the nation. So, like every province has some of that, more in some provinces than others. Especially, same thing with Iraq and Jordan. So these tribes basically sometimes are big families that are across different countries. So after the massacre, there was a massacre. Literally, children were killed, women were killed, people in the hospital were basically went and shot dead. Bodies were all over the floor, really. Like the videos were out there. And that really made these Bedouins go also, get very angry. Now, they all organized. All these Bedouins sent their militias or sent their whatever, basically, their fighters. Right now, we have tens of thousands of people going or arrived at Sweda, and the clashes already started. It's going to remind us of what happened earlier in Syria, where the whole country was liberated. Now, Sweda was not touched because of that minority exclusivity, really, and because al-Shara was trying to say, look, we are not here to, the Druze, at the end of the day, they did support the Assad regime historically. Some of them were anti-regime also. They tried to be neutral. At Druze, they always try to be neutral, but behind the scenes, they would basically always get external support from foreign countries and so forth, whether in Lebanon or Syria, same context, really. Yeah.
So, Sheikh, you mentioned that the Druze have been trying to stay neutral, even though they've been receiving some support behind the scene, and some are more overt, as you mentioned. Now, why is it then that there is this concern for their safety, and then now Israel's using that to, say that we need to intervene in Syria? And then how did this whole situation start between the army and even the Druze in the first place?
So historically, the Druze do not want to basically live under any Islamic majority. Okay? To be honest, basically, if you read history, there are lots of clashes between the Druze and Muslim majority. And they always, even during the Crusades, they helped the Crusades against the Muslims in many cases, and they allied with them. So the tension is historical. It's hundreds and hundreds of years. And to be honest, basically, not all the Druze are in one camp. So, the Hajri camp, this Hikmat al-Hajri, is definitely he's a big leader, but he's leading this fight against the government. They already rejected the Sharia government. They rejected the Syrian government. They rejected, and they announced even an autonomous region, or
Yes.
at least, so they have a huge interest, right? A vital interest in allying themselves with Israel. And don't forget, there's also a Druze chunk in, the occupied Palestine, basically,
Yes.
which Israel controls. So these connections are already there. Basically, there are lots of Druze in the Israeli army, in the IDF. So the Druze basically position themselves to build their own little state. They want a Druze state, supported by Israel, protected by Israel, that's independent of Syria. Now, to be honest, the Druze, in their majority, in their populace, are not for that idea, which is why it didn't happen. So, as you can see, there's lots of dynamics going on from within the Druze sect and between the Israelis or the Druze in Israel and the Israeli government supporting them. From a perspective, the Israeli interest is to definitely basically help them build their own state, an autonomous state. You break off Syria into pieces, or at least you create. If you don't break it fully politically, so it becomes totally independent, because if this autonomous state becomes an independent real state, right, and they create a peace treaty, again, it's not good for Israel. Israel wants the whole Middle East to continue to be in a state of war. As a strategist, if I'm on the Israeli side, I would say let it not just divide, let it burn, and that's what the Israelis want, and that's why, and this is what explains why the Israelis first supported them, and now they're just hands off a little bit. Like as of now, with all these Bedouins, basically militias coming, and literally they're coming, as I said, en masse, basically tens of thousands of fighters have engulfed Asweda. So don't forget, Syria is 85% Sunni. Okay, so let's say it's 20, 25 million, whatever basically is inside Syria right now. Let's say 25 for the sake of the argument. 85%, that's a big number. That's 23 million. So plus, so the Druze, what is the Druze? The Druze are basically 500,000, 1 million max. You know what I'm saying? So it's the Alawites are 8%. The Druze are a little bit less, 5 to 6%. So 5% of 25, that's just like a million plus or minus.
So, Sheikh, John Sawyers, who's a former chief at the British Secret Intelligence Services, he said a couple of things about this. He said, number one, Israel, as you mentioned, is looking for a fragmented Syria, one that's weak and divided, and that this was not in support of the Druze, but rather an attempt to fragment Syria out of the fear of a future management of their mutual border. Now, why would Israel want more instability? Of course, they want instability in the region, but why right on their closer? Because it's not far off from the Israeli border. Like Syria's right beside them, right? Why would they want instability there? Would they want more stability for themselves to protect their own borders?
No. Actually, as I said, basically, the Israelis would want instability in that area because an instability within the Syrian, region will create instability for the government. Like, the instability will make weaker Syria. The objective is weaker, divided. Syria. You see what I'm saying? Now, why would a British intelligence head say what he said? You need to also understand the British Empire's old alliances. The Druze in Lebanon and Syria, historically, even before the creation of Lebanon, the Druze in the Levant, historically, they were fully allied with Britain. Britain was the protector of the Druze. Okay? During the later times of the Ottoman Caliphate, there was something called basically the problem of the minorities, okay, within the state, and that's where the Western countries came and intervened on behalf of these minorities based upon that they've been abused and so forth. Definitely, all these were lies, but they adopted the British adopted the Druze in this area, and the French adopted the Maronite, the Christians in the area, and even until now, basically the Catholic Church and then the French basically they're the protectors of the Christians within the Levant, Lebanon, Syria. And the British are the protectors of the Druze. Now, why is the head of intelligence or ex-head of intelligence in Britain saying that? He's literally telling the Israelis, what you're doing is not in the benefit of the Druze. So he is the protector of the Druze. Period. He will play his role as it is historically to protect this minority because they trust Britain. So it's a pawn within the British Empire's. Or there's no empire anymore. The UK's chessboard. Okay, so But what is the Israeli interest? The Israeli interest is to who cares? They say like, look, let them burn. We're going to use them to inflame instability in Syria. Now behind the scenes, they're going to tell the Hajri and his militia, "We're with you. We're going to support you 100%. We're going to blah blah." And when they don't, they'll give excuses, but they will always back them up. Okay, so to keep that line of communication, the Israelis and Hikmat al-Hajri are Hikmat al-Hajri is 100% agent for the Israelis. Overtly. He doesn't deny it. And that's why they called for integration into the state of Israel. You see what I'm saying? And this has basically infuriated the whole Syrian public, in addition to many Druze themselves. And even many Druze leaders rejected it. So there was a divide. You see what I'm saying?
So now you see that the British are saying things to kind of protect or support of the Druze. Now the Americans are saying something a little bit different, right? So Thomas Barak, right, who's President Donald Trump's special envoy to Syria and the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, he said a couple of things. One, he said, what we've learned is federalism does not work. And then he started to rebuke and even said that he wants the Kurdish-led enclave in northeast Syria and the Druze in the country's south to make larger concessions to Shara. There's only one road, and it leads to Damascus.
Yeah, so look, the Americans, the Americans are happy with the Shara. They made a deal. He's appeasing them. They're happy with him being there. So that's number one. Number two, I think the American position is part of a greater agreement with the Turks. Okay, Turkey, and I think Erdogan or one of the probably the foreign minister made a statement that any type of division in Syria is against Turkish national vital interests. And then Turkey will never allow it to happen.
Yes.
Because disintegrated Syria will create big ruckus for Turkey on its borders. So Turkey will not allow it. So there's already an understanding. We already said from the beginning before the regime was toppled, and while the regime was being toppled, we said that there's an agreement between Turkey and the United States. And so that's what's happening. At the end of the day, the position of the Americans is keep things under control and keep these basically areas of instability, if not for today, for tomorrow. So the Americans did ask the Israelis to stop bombarding the Syrian government again, and it seemed it's partly maybe that's why they stopped, maybe, but partly also basically they already caused a chaos and a fight between the Syrian government and the Druze. Like when the Israelis came in, they encouraged the Hajri's militia to go and fight, and they fought on behalf of them to basically beat up the Syrian army, the new Syrian army, and the security services, right? So right now people want revenge. They're going to go and basically create revenge against the Druze. What is that going to do? It's going to create revenge in the mind of the Druze as a sect, maybe, hopefully not. But definitely, at least within the Hajri's militia and their followers of the Druze, because the sect is at least split into two, at least. Okay, so now there's going to be a Druze versus Sunni Muslims revenge, and that's going to continue forever. So you see what the Israelis might have created on purpose. They could have encouraged the Hajri to go pick up a fight. They defended them harshly to create a response from the Sunni majority country, to create this, sadly, perpetual sectarian fighting in Syria, and that would basically literally weaken Syria strategically for even the long term, if not dealt with in the right way.
So my question is, we see what Israel wants. We see what we see that Israel wants, and now in terms of this issue, though, why is it, number one, Jolani pulled out his army from, like, his troops from there in the first place, and then the second thing is, Turkey is saying we don't want to split Syria, we don't want to divide Syria, but is this just cheap words that they're using? Like, to what extent can Turkey go to enforce and protect Syria from being divided?
Well, it depends. Like, they're going to calculate every step, and they're going to support from behind the scenes. They don't go into a confrontation with Israel head to head. They don't want to do that either, right? So, but let's put the Turkish a little bit aside, because at the end of the day, the one who brought Jolani into his role as the president of Syria was the Turkish intelligence and Turkey with alignment from the United States. This is open information. I mean, Jolani doesn't deny it. So let's go back to your question. Why did Jolani pull his forces? Well, he pulled his forces because they lost 700 people. If he kept them and the Israelis continued to bombard them, they could have been exterminated. That's number one. Number two, and this is very important to understand, that Jolani, before this whole incident happened, took the weapons away from the Bedouins of Aswayda.
Really?
Yes. So made them vulnerable to the militias. If these Bedouins continue to have their weapons,
Yes.
the Hajri militias wouldn't have slaughtered them. You see what I'm saying? So again, this is where basically we need to understand why did he pull the weapons from this specific Bedouin province? Made them vulnerable. And that means basically maybe he wanted the Hajri militias to target them. So he has his populace, anger that deals with it instead of his army, right? Like he can't confront Israel right now. He's too weak to do that, too coward to do that. So he pulled the Syrian army and the security forces, and then made it a public issue. He says, "Look, you want to deal with the Syrian public? That's fine. Go ahead and try to kill 25 million Syrians." So that's kind of a response to the Israelis. You see what I'm saying? But again, the issue is now it's not now a Syrian government oppressing a sect. That's sadly basically the Sunni majority, kind of like sadly confronting the Druze, right? So again, that's why partly we need to understand what is the interest of Jolani,
And what would be Jolani's interest in this situation, right? Because before it seemed like he was actually leading towards normalization. For example, you have Marco Rubio. He gave the 5 conditions, right, that America would like to see Jolani's regime abide by, and one of them being the Abraham Accords. So this whole situation came in to kind of sabotage this. We're seeing signs of him looking like he was about to move closer.
The Israelis beat up. They destroyed all the military, sites in Syria, and still Jolani came and said, "We want to normalize." He was okay with normalization as long as maybe there's some payback from the Israelis in terms of retreating back to the original Golan height that was occupied from the Israelis from before in '67 and so forth. So he was not against the normalization. This was verbalized. This was in the open. This was in the news, and definitely this stuff is not going to change it.
So now Israel hitting him back and trying to keep this region and this countries of Syria unstable. Do they view Jolani as a threat? Because this did not happen in the time of Bashar al-Assad. They were hitting strikes, but not to this extent. So what's different? Is Jolani a threat to Israel?
Jolani cannot be a threat to Israel, and Trump sits with Jolani and makes a deal and so forth. If Jolani was a threat, the Americans would exterminate him. Not really. The Americans worked with the Turks to bring Jolani into the leadership of Syria. Okay? And you need to understand, let's discuss something specific, that people don't switch overnight. Okay? People don't switch overnight. And if people do change, they change over long years. Okay? And if they do change, they change from one position to an adjacent position. They don't go diametrically in opposition to what they believe. They don't go 180 degrees. So they don't do it 180 degrees, even basically in a slow motion. And definitely they don't do it overnight. You need to understand, Ahmed Shara or Abu Muhammad al-Julani used to be Al-Qaeda and ISIS leader. He went from that to become the president of Syria, that Mr. Trump is okay to sit with one-on-one on TV. So definitely, basically, you need to understand that this person had history. The only thing that explains it is that it had history. Even the Quran, I know basically our Muslim audience don't like to hear this, but let's listen to the Quran. The Quran basically, when it speaks about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah says, in the translation of the meaning of the verse, that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent 40 years in Quraysh, and he never basically did poems. He was not a poet, and he cannot just basically, create the Quran overnight like that. You know what I'm saying? Because they're accusing him that this is your words, this is your work, and so forth. And he never lied, and so forth. So even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from a spiritual perspective, right, uses this argument that humans naturally don't change overnight. It takes long years, right? So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam all of a sudden became a prophet, declared himself a prophet overnight. That is not something that can happen naturally, and he does not become a poet overnight like that either. So we need to understand that Jolani cannot go from ISIS to the okay president of Syria by from an American perspective. It does not happen. So definitely al-Julani is not a threat for the United States. He's actually the preferred person to lead the country. They praise him in many different ways, from his looks to his leadership skills to his even his, Trump even basically praised his fighting abilities. So definitely he's not a threat to the Americans, and whatever is not a threat to the Americans is not necessarily a threat to the Israelis.
So the Israelis, when Ben Gavir and just others are talking about we should kill Jolani, we should get rid of the Syrians, and what is this, public consumption, or is there actually a group in Israel that wants to get rid of them?
Definitely. You need to understand what happened behind the scenes in terms of negotiations, especially when you have covert operations. Like there is something called intelligence agencies, right? These intelligence agencies has spies. There's a spy world that exists. There's nothing conspiratorial about this, right? The spying is part of every government. So covert operations exist. So there's things that happen behind the scenes. There's deals that happen behind the scenes, and that's part of the game of international relations and the game of nations. So there's always a public consumption talk for the popular base of a politician, and there's maybe signaling and communications, and there's also disinformation for opponents within the political game. So we need to differentiate. So definitely, if Israel feels that Jolani is actually an existential threat, they would kill him. They can kill him. They know where he is, and when they struck the defense department, it was pretty close. Yeah, exactly, it's very close to the presidential palace. So they know when he's there. We know like they can easily smash it because Syria doesn't have any air defense systems, and they cannot retaliate. So if the Israelis don't like him, they'll kill him. Okay, he's easier. Who's easier to kill, Jolani or the Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran? There's not. You can't even compare, right?
Now, Marco Rubio called this whole situation an unfortunate situation and a misunderstanding between Syria and Israel, and that we expect things to be resolved in the next coming days. Now, Israel has an interest to make this unstable, but America, did they allow this? Were they aware of the strike? And what's at stake for the U.S. if this whole situation just continues and these clashes continue?
Look, I mean, if the United States, does not care about the Middle East. So I would say basically sometimes we estimate what really they want. They want the region to continue to be in constant tension and conflict. It's been like that for the last 75 years, and it's going to continue because that's policy. That's U.S./Western policy to keep the Islamic region in constant conflict. Why? Because conflict doesn't lead to progress, doesn't lead to development, doesn't lead to nation building, doesn't lead to advancement. And they want to subdue this area. So they've subdued it already since World War I, and they continue the subduement through continuous perpetual cycles of violence. So I don't see basically necessarily the American interest being trampled here. It's not. They don't really care. The only thing that the British basically, because they are the caregiver for the Druze in the area. So the Druze came in and called the British like, "Yo, we need help. Our people are getting this and that." So they kind of came in and the head of intelligence came and spoke. And as I said, basically the Americans also told the Israelis to stop the attack on the Syrian administration from that perspective. So the reason Jolani is important for the United States is because he can control society. The Syrian society is very Islamic. Okay, they love Islam. People want to live by Islam. And they're not going to accept another Assad, right? This is the Syrian people, in 2011, they said their word. They're serious about it. They're not going to accept a dictator. They're not going to accept a tyrant. So you can't control a nation of 25 million people in the heart of the Middle East, which is one of the most important regions in the world, with another Assad-like or non-Sunni person, or even non-Sunni secular person. The country will continue to fall into chaos. And then if it does, and the Americans don't set a leader, then a leader will basically, rise naturally within the masses. And then now you have a bigger problem. You see what I'm saying? And that's why it's better for the United States to groom an agent for them that looks Islamic, that proved himself to be very Islamic. Yeah. Definitely, we don't consider Al Qaeda nor ISIS to be Islamic in any way or shape. Sadly, they are. Sadly, they are. Yeah, we always get tricked, and they cause chaos and havoc in our region, and we believe that they are manufactured by Western intelligence agencies. Sadly, we don't understand that, and sadly, they cause lots of ruckus, and sadly, we need to fully reject such, militant movements. So they because sadly because the Muslims are pretty emotional, and because you can really shape the public sentiment through emotion and imagery and so forth. So this guy was like, oh, a guy, he fought for Islam and fought for Syria and so forth, big beard. So they reproduced him to become a nice looking president of Syria that's acceptable by the people. Like, you have to do that if you want to control the Syrian society. You have to put a person that is acceptable by the supermajority. This way, basically, you have full control, and then the regime that you build that will serve your interest is stable. You see what I'm saying?
So Jolani was there to build more control over the majority Sunni population and to have control over them. Now, what we're seeing, Sheikh, is that the Bedouins have released a statement, right, demanding that Jolani let them defend themselves without interfering in favor of the Druze.
That's a lie. Anybody who says that is a lie. And the reason it's a lie is because just like when we see organization, there must be some form of organizing agency. These Bedouins, and there's many tribes in Syria, they already built a unified command and control council for all the tribes. And that means basically things are already synced up. And the government could not basically be out of this function. Okay? It cannot. Okay, no, this is the other way around. I think what used to be called HTS, which became really the new Syrian army under the leadership of the same commander, which is Abu Muhammad al-Julani, did control Syria. And when he pulled his security forces out, he let the Bedouins in. This was a move that's premeditated by Jolani himself, and to put again the Sunni majority against the Druze minority, sadly. And now he's just like sitting there and watching.
Now, in terms of the American support, Jolani was there for that reason. Now, is Jolani in control, Chef? And where is this situation gonna go? Right? Is he gonna do his job successfully,
Sure,
or is he failing in his mission?
No, Jolani is in control, and the reason he's in control because he's very popular. Jolani is super popular inside Syria. Period. Like the super majority of the Sunni majority, okay, are with Jolani. So he is in a strong position, and I think what's going to happen in the Suwaida is what happened in the Sahel, in the coast, in the west coast where the Alawites were, because there was also basically scrimmages that happened that was led by basically some militias that were, heavy trained and so forth, and then the security forces and that time basically came and just cleansed everything up, and now it's a little bit more controlled. Doesn't mean it's not going to come back again. You see what I'm saying? So what's going to happen? What I believe is going to happen in the next day or two is that the Bedouins and the because they sent around like I think 50,000 people, strong force, 50,000. That's a huge force. You see what I'm saying? So they will be able to clean up. They will be able to actually like at least defeat the Hajiri's militia, and hopefully basically bring peace back. And I personally believe that the Druze needs to be treated with respect. And to be incorporated within basically the state to make sure there's no sectarianism. As Muslims, we're anti-sectarian from that perspective, and if you want to really build a country, you have to basically give what Islam basically says is the right for these minorities, and definitely at the least of these rights that Islam basically provides is respect and to treat them with dignity and so forth. So. If Sharia wants to do it, if he has good intention at least towards this, now we speak about intention. I don't like to speak about intention. We speak about politics because it's all about interests, not intention. But if the Syrian people and the good minds within the Syrian administration, they will understand that if we don't fix this relationship, this tension will continue and the tension will come back again, and bite the Syrian people. We want stable Syria. We want a Syria that everybody's dignified in it, everybody's respected, and there's justice for everybody, equal justice for every person in the country. And definitely these militias that have foreign links to other states must be like any country would do in the world that respects itself, that needs to be neutralized, or at least taken under the proper judicial processes to safeguard the national interest of the nation and the people.
So, Sheikh, drawing this podcast to a close, online, many people are tying Israel's attacks in Syria and the support of the Druze to this greater Israel project, David's corridor. They're trying to expand in the region. Is this something that could lead to that? Or is this something that maybe people are a bit too sensitive about?
Look, the Israelis, as a country, we already said the reason it basically smashing Iran, they are a strong regional power that wants to expand at least its influence, if not its geography, and they're very vocal about expanding their geography. They want to occupy. They want Israel to take over Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and good portion of Iraq, and good portion of Saudi Arabia, and good portion of Egypt. They want to occupy all these states and then they smash these people. And this is what they want, and they say it very, very they're very vocal about it. Politicians, public, intelligence, everybody. So I mean, it's just look, if a country wants to expand from within the game of nations and the international relations, like you understand. So this is a national interest for the Israeli, not this specific Israeli government, but the nation of Israel, is to create the greater Israel, which is from the Nile to the Euphrates, and so they will always try to build that David's corridor that links them with the Kurds, so they can now support the Kurds to again subdue the Sunni majority in Syria. So definitely they'll try, and I would say basically what happened is part of that, is a step towards that direction.
Speaking of Game of Nations, what should Jolani and the Syrians do, in order to strengthen and defend their territory against Israel's expansionism and influence?
Well, I think if they basically can neutralize, if they can desectarianize the issue, and then win over at least the good leadership of the Druze, and then neutralize al-Hajri, this will basically be in the interest of the Syrian people. Because you want to make sure that these minorities are not gonna deal with foreign powers against their own state and their own nation.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. Appreciate the time.
Bless you.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Like, comment, share, subscribe. You know where to be to watch the most cutting edge political analysis on the internet. We'll see you on the next episode of i3 Pulse. Assalamu alaikum.